Yes, I think it's very easy us as humans to think that we are somehow superior. But we sometimes need to take a step back and see that there is intelligence in every single part of nature. We're not the only intelligent beings on Earth.
Hello there. My name is Kit Rackley, my pronouns are they, them, and this is Coffee and Geography. The aim of the show is to get to know, explore and celebrate the diverse and intersectional range of people on this rock we call home and their love and passions of it. We'll find out why guests identify as geographers, and if they don't exactly, we'll have fun exploring all the myriad of ways that connects their life to geography. So, pour your favourite brew, get cosy and listen in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at CoffeeJogPot. Off we go. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Geography. I am joined by someone I have been connected to through an alternative career path, and that is Joana Mendes. Hello Joanna.
Hello Kit.
It's lovely to see you after 2 years.
That's right, yeah. It's been already 2 years and so much has happened.
So much has happened. So to introduce Joanna, Joanna says that she is in constant awe by our world and the beings that inhabit it. She enjoys observing and understanding natural phenomena and the relationships between fellow humans and their environment. And because of this curiosity, Joanna was driven to study physics and meteorology. And although she's secretly inspired by philosophy, that's definitely something we're going to talk about a bit later. Being environmentally conscious, at a very young age, Joanna has sought to ally her academic background with green and sustainable energies and has been focusing her career in energy meteorology for renewables, currently a senior scientific consultant for the energy industry at the UK Met Office. Inspired by philosophy. I really like that. Now, I want to talk about it in more detail later, but because I'm so fascinated and I want you to give everybody a bit of a teaser, can you maybe start by giving us a brief example about maybe how a particular philosophy coalesces with your passion for nature or your identity?
I think it's hard to pick a single philosophical tradition or idea. What I like about philosophy is the openness of the questions and the fact that you're in constant inquiry. So I think that's what links with, the interest with science and understanding the earth and understanding us humans and, living on this planet.
Yeah, and as I say, we'll come back to this in a bit more detail because I have so many kind of ideas and things to talk to you about. So at the start of each podcast, we talk about kind of like the brews that we drink. So because we're attempting to map our brews and beverages, so listeners can have a little investigation of the countless ways we are interconnected around the world. So I have my fantastic, I'm just going to show Joanna on the camera here, world's okayest geography teacher mug that was given to me by an ex-student. Yeah, and in it I've got some caffeine-free instant coffee. So that's because we're recording this in the evening. What do you usually like to drink then, Joanna?
I'm going to sound really boring. I usually like to drink water, just plain water. But I also enjoy very much a cup of tea, and I like to try different kinds of tea. I know in the UK, most people drink, the black tea, but I kind of like red teas and herbal teas and green teas. So I do like to vary a little bit. There's a brand called Gorreana. It's a tea from the Azores Islands. So they actually produce tea there because they have the climate. I think it's one of the few, or the only place in Europe where they produce tea. I might be wrong. It might be one of the few, but yeah. So they have wonderful green and black teas, and the flavor is so much more subtle that I think if you add milk to your black tea, you're kind of spoiling it a little bit.
Right. Okay, that is something that is going to be a fantastic addition to our map, because one of the things that students doing an inquiry will look at that, they'll quite clearly see that there's a geographical pattern to the location of where their sources of their teas and coffees are coming from. That one's going to look like a bit of an outlier. And so that will be very, very interesting for them to investigate. Thank you for that, Joanna. That's going to be fantastic. Now, as you mentioned in the intro, you're a senior scientific consultant at the UK Met Office, focused on energy meteorology, which is how we got to know each other. Mm-hmm. So you're in the southwest of England, in Exeter and Devon. So how long have you been in Exeter for? How long have you been in the area?
Oh gosh, it's approaching 8 years. So I moved to Exeter for the job back in 2013, and this is really a wonderful area of the country to be living in, because you've got the countryside, you've got Dartmoor and Exmoor and Cornwall just around the corner, and lots of wonderful beaches. So yeah, you're a bit tucked away from the rest of the country, so it's a bit harder to get to other points in the UK, but it's okay, because, there's so much to explore here outdoors as well.
So where were you before 2013?
So before that, I was in Porto, which is my hometown in Portugal. I was there working for 3 years, and before that, I was actually living in Reading when I was doing my MSc. So yeah, that was my first experience abroad. And so yeah, about 3 years later, I moved back to the UK.
Something about this island then. So you've been in Exeter long enough, perhaps, that you've got a really good sense of feel for the place, and you've mentioned those beautiful areas of outstanding natural beauty and the national parks there, classic geography textbook locations as well. So how do you feel that being in the Devon area has kind of shaped maybe who you are? I mean, has it kind of enhanced kind of things of your Portuguese background? Has it kind of morphed things, merged things? How has Exeter in the area become part of you, and how has it melded with your identity?
That's actually a very interesting question. I actually think about that quite often, because I remember the feeling when I moved here. I was already an adult, and I had all my life back in Portugal, and so it was a bit of an adventure. So I didn't know anybody in Exeter. So it was that thing of, starting your social network from scratch, from zero. So that was quite interesting, at, my late 20s. So I think it kind of forced me to look inside and to be more at ease at being on my own. And, just doing things on my own and go out and meet people. So yeah, it was an interesting experience to get used to being on your own and being okay with that, just go out and do activities on your own, or go out and meet new people. And because I was living in Porto, and it's quite a big city in comparison. You kind of used to all that hustle and bustle of moving around a lot and meeting people all the time, and you kind of come here and it's so quiet. But the funny thing is, now going back home, it feels just a bit too much. So I'm actually used to quiet and living in a kind of a country environment, and I'm quite enjoying that. I think it has to do probably with stages in your life, and it's probably was the time to move to a different place and live life a bit differently.
It does. Places do that to people, don't they? They both enhance and mold and change your identity. And so when you do go back from like the place where you come from, like it just does seem so out of time. Now I must ask this, all right? Cream tea scones. Do you put the cream on first, then the jam on top, or do you put the jam on the scone first, then the cream on top?
Devonish way, definitely. Cream first.
I was really hoping you would have said like the Cornish way. So for those people listening, what are you talking about? There's this rivalry between Cornwall and Devon about how they make cream tea. So a cream tea is a drink of your choice, hot drink of your choice, but you get a scone with cream and jam. But it's the way round you put the cream and the jam on, which is the very bone of contention. So Joanna does it the Devon way, which makes sense if you're in Devon. Is that because everyone else around? Is it because of peer pressure? Why do you do it that way? Or just because you like it?
Because it's more convenient, actually, and it makes more sense. Because if you put the cream first, it's more sticky, so it's easier to put the jam on top. Whereas if you put the jam first, it's quite hard to put a very sticky cream on top of the jam. It's just going to go everywhere.
Oh, for balance, I'm going to have someone come on from Cornwall now, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be biased. So, oh, excellent. Moving swiftly on before we go down that rabbit hole, I'd like to go back to something you gave me in your bio about being inspired by philosophy. And I want to use something that you told me beforehand, because it reads so beautifully, and I think it sets the scene very nicely. And this is what you said. You said, "I am fascinated about the world we live in, how nature has gifted us with so many spheres, creating a symbiotic existence between plants, humans, and other animals. We all share this complex and fragile environment of water, earth, fire, and air, and I feel so fortunate to be able to learn about its dynamics and interactions." If that doesn't bleed "I am a geographer" through and through, then I don't know what does, right? So for those curious about that and want to know more, what example would you give of this symbiotic existence?
You just need to be aware of where you live. You just need to look around and see the plants and look around and see what you eat and what you look at and the animals that are around you and how you, for example, you interact with pets or any animals, and how important each existence is for all of us to be here. So if you take one element, then it won't be the same. Everything will be affected, and I guess that's one of the reasons why there's so much, for example, nowadays there's so much concern about bees, because they're so essential to our existence. And you might not realize that if there were no bees, we would have no plants, we would have no food, we would starve as humans to think that we are somehow superior. But we sometimes need to take a step back and see that there is intelligence in every single part of nature. We're not the only intelligent beings on Earth.
There seems to be this thing about the human race where we don't just feel we're superior, we feel like we're a keystone as well. Like without us, everything else falls apart. Well, in my opinion, it's the complete opposite. We're such a disruptive force. And one thing I read when I was quite young, actually, when I was doing my degree, so I was in my late teens, early 20s, I read James Lovelock's Gaia theory. So, I can't remember exactly what the book was called, but the theory itself is not something I subscribe to, but I like Gaia theory more of a philosophy. And so you were talking about exactly that kind of thing, that like if the Earth is a symbiotic kind of thing and it all works as a single being with all these components that help it along its way, and we know through the work that we do that things are interconnected, that if you change one part of a system, it will impact another part of the system. Even if you change something in what seems to be an unrelated system, it will have some kind of impact down the line. We will talk shop just a tiny, tiny bit. How does that manifest itself in the work that you do in energy and meteorology?
It's you understanding the connection, that there is a link of cause and effect, and particularly in the case of energy, as you said, it might not be clear for some people, but as soon as you mention it, people think, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Because of course, if it's more windy, then you have your wind farms producing more energy, or more. Got a sunny day, then your PV is going to be yielding much more power as well. It's also because it's an interdisciplinary area. I remember, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, it wasn't really a thing. And it kind of became more evident for the people working in the industry that, okay, wait a second, actually, we know that if there's a storm coming, that's going to impact our power systems, and we might have power lines falling down and creating damage to infrastructure and maybe potentially dangerous to people. So yeah, it's essentially just understanding that that connection between the weather in this case and our power systems, but also keeping an open mind. I think we can get so much more by speaking, by being interested in other areas of research, because it can only enrich what you do. Because there might be an element I've never thought of. Oh, actually, this might impact what I do, and what I do might impact what you do. And, there is a common interest there. And I think we used to have a tendency of closing our research into little boxes. But I think more and more you see more of an openness of interdisciplinary projects. Particularly, I've been involved in several big European funded projects, and there's people from all sorts of areas. It's not just meteorology, it's not just engineering, but sometimes you have biologists. You have to assess the environmental impact on, for example, toads on a specific area. Or bats. How the wind turbines can affect the echoing of the bats, so they kind of get a bit lost. So it's really, just taking that step back again and thinking, oh, wait a second, maybe, there is more to what I do. There are more impacts to this research rather than just, my tiny little cubicle.
I definitely saw that when we went to the conference in Denmark, the International Conference on Energy and Meteorology, and that was my first experience of like a group of academics and researchers getting together and trying to bring their disciplines together. And then like even the what meet thing, I've got a lot of geography teachers listening, so they would recognize something called a teach meet, and I kind of did something similar for us called a what meet, and the different stories in then that we all did, and you did one as well, and it was excellent just having all those different stories coming together and seeing how they all link together. And that, I'd say I was rushed off my feet because I was the person who had to do all the logistics and the organise and stuff like that. But I absolutely loved those few days because I learned so much, and it was just such a delight to see all these different people with all these different skill sets, talents, and expertise come together and try to find a way forward in a symbiotic, synergetic way. It was lovely. I mean, there was 3 or 4 of you from the Met Office who came over, I think, and then you had, and I've actually spoken to Dr. Hannah Bloomfield for this podcast, so she was on a couple of episodes ago, so she was there too with her colleagues from the University of Reading, David Brayshaw and everybody. So yeah, and then you had people from the energy industry, and it was just absolutely lovely and delightful. And I couldn't believe how complex of a system we were. As a group. And it surprised me to hear, because you've told me it before, but it surprised me to hear that this is a recent phenomena, that this kind of interaction's taking place, which is a damn shame, because we need to act like the Earth does itself, don't we, as human beings? We need to be connecting more and sharing our expertise and bringing it into a synergetic kind of outcome. But yeah, we would have had another conference this year, but obviously a certain sort of something put pains to that. I think it was going to be in the Caribbean.
Was it? That's a shame.
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of inside knowledge for you, but that was what the murmurs were. We're going to come back to you personally now, and we're going to do a little skit called Spill the Beans. This is for you to tell us something that probably people didn't know about you, and that is you are a yogini, and you have started to learn Sanskrit and learn about classical Indian music. Where do I start with this? It's quite clear that you have a fascination with that part of the world and its culture. So how did you get into all of that? Where did it start? What draws you to that kind of stuff?
Again, it's hard because you can't really pin a moment or an intention within you to do it. You just kind of almost like a calling. I know this is a bit of a strong word, but there was something that kind of was calling me, saying, "Oh, hello, I'm here. Would you like to know more about me?" So this is actually now maybe 18 years ago. So it was quite a long time ago when I was first started to practice yoga. But in the beginning, it was I would mostly go to classes focused on the physical side. And then kind of naturally went into, okay, there's something more in here. There's something a bit more profound. There's something a bit more subtle that I would like to learn, and I would like to experience. And so a few years ago, I started doing foundation course in yoga, and I'm just wrapping up my teacher training. So that actually put me into that world. So I kind of really done a deep dive into the practice. So, now I've got an established daily practice, but also reading the texts that come into yoga, where yoga is referenced. And you start to realize the richness of it and how it intertwines, and you kind of mixes so well with philosophy, or if you want to call it religion, ethics, health, just how we interact with other people, how we interact with ourselves. There's so much in there that it's so well rounded, that you can incorporate that into your life really well. And I think it has expanded a view of who I am, and a view of who we are as humans, and what is that thing that connects us, that is not just our genes. What is the feelings? What are feelings? What is this yearning that we all have for something more, this constant insatisfactoriness that we feel? What is this? Where is it coming from? And how can we be more at ease with that? Maybe find some sort of happiness. So as I said, yoga is such a broad word, or it can mean so many things for different people. So, for example, the word itself, yoga, comes from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to yoke or to unite. But in some Indian philosophical traditions, yoga also means to disconnect one mind, so to kind of understand the self as independent of your ego, if that makes sense.
I've definitely been humbled and displayed my Western ego and ignorance, because of course when I read that, the first thing I think about is the yoga classes that I went to, to help me get fitter, help me get healthier. And I admit I did go more for the physical exercise than I did for I'm very terrible at things like meditation. I wanted to do it, and I really did want to practice meditation, but my mind just races at 100 miles an hour, and I find it very, very difficult to, no matter what my yoga teacher did, I just could not disengage, as you just said. And I think I actually found it very, very soothing just listening to you talk about it. And I could tell it from the calmness in your voice, and how that was almost kind of, I would say you used the word religious yourself, but it was like a kind of a spiritual way of kind of expressing those feelings and thoughts. So yeah, and I think that's just a prime example of how, yoga is yet another thing that has been westernized. And for you to kind of have this, you've done this where you've connected back to this, and you've gone back towards the culture and what it really means, and then look into the Sanskrit and then maybe some music as well. That's beautiful. And you said you found a lot of connections. So you're someone who lives in the UK, originally from Portugal, but you found connection in something from an Indian subcontinent culture. That's delightful. Is the word I can say. That's delightful, because that's a really good example of how the human race should be embracing its diversity. Just trying to think. Take me through the chakras again, because one of the things that my yoga teacher tried to do was get to focus on our different chakras. So I can't, for the life of me, remember any names of them now, unfortunately. And I know they all have different meanings. Is there a proper place to start? Do you start from the base of the coccyx first?
Usually, yes, but maybe let's put this in a bit of a context. So,
just sure.
Yeah, for people who don't know what chakra is, chakra is means, or can be translated as wheel. So essentially, they are wheels of energy, and we're talking about energy in a kind of a subtle way. So you can actually, I think everybody experiences this, but if you're just aware. So if, for example, you are in a very uncomfortable situation, where do you feel it? Where's the tension, right?
Yeah.
Or if you've had a love heartbreak, where does that feel? Or if you want to speak and you can't speak, if you're preparing for a talk, where does that feel? So it's realizing where these centers of energy are concentrated. So the chakras are actually, if you look into books, some books can say you have 6, some you say you have 7. So there's a slight variation there, but essentially is learning how to become aware of these energy centers throughout the body, which are usually aligned in the middle, so through the spine, because that's where they think. You've got the channels of energy which come up and down the spine. And the idea is for you to be able to recognize those centers and kind of being able to move the energy upwards towards the top of the head, where you will be able to open up your consciousness. So it's kind of a voyage through using your body to experience something that is out of the body.
I remember that yoga teacher taking us through that journey of moving up the spine and the breathing techniques to try and now that I think about it, quite a lot of the physical exercises focused a lot on the spine and kind of moving up and down your spine. That leads me on to then. So one thing is that we're all doing a lot, probably too much nowadays, and it's going to be here to stay to an extent, of course, is working from home here on our computer desks like we are talking right now, rather than actually having a cup of tea or coffee with each other. What would be a recommended exercise, do you think? And it could be for mental health, it could be for physical, but I've been sitting here for way too long. I really need to get up and stretch. If you could recommend just one simple exercise that people could do, what would you recommend?
When we're sitting down, we have this tendency to slouch, particularly the upper back.
I'm terrible for that.
Tension, around the neck and the shoulders. And if you're doing computer work, you're kind of like hunchbacking the whole time. So what will be really beneficial is to elongate your spine. So going into a posture that relieves the tension in the neck and shoulders, but at the same time lengthening the whole of the spine, so it's not twisted or sideways. So I personally find that doing down dog, I'm not sure if you know,
downward facing dog,
downward facing dog. So you kind of have you can start with from all fours position, and then you place your heels on the floor, so stretching your knees, and you essentially as an inverted U or V shape. So as you see, you have both feet on the floor, both hands on the floor. Ideally, if you want to keep aligned with your anatomy, then you would have feet hip width and hands about shoulder width. But the good thing is that there, in that position, you are not only lengthening the spine, but also you are relieving that tension that you have created along the neck and shoulders. So that the head is just there freely.
I promise, I'm making a commitment to you, Joanna, everybody listening. Downward facing dog now. Like when I get up and stretch, I'll do that as well. I used to, this is so depressing. I got pretty flexible, and I actually was almost got my heels down because I've got excruciatingly tight hamstrings. So I find it very, very difficult to do downward facing. But I was getting there. I was getting to the point where my heels were almost to the ground, but now I've just gone back to square one.
That's not important, and I think that is the beauty of the yoga class, which is it is adaptable to what you can do. So you are making an effort, but you have to work with what you've got. So there are many variations of downward facing dog. Actually, people with disabilities can make can do down facing dog if you do the right variations, if you use the right props. So yoga is actually for everybody because it is for you and it has to be adapted to you. It's not about I'm going to achieve this beautiful yoga posture. It's more like, okay, how does that make me feel? How does that improving, my health, but also how is that making my mind a bit more soothed? And I can rest my thoughts and I can quiet that busy mind that you were talking about. And you can do this through the postures. You can do this through meditation. You can do this through music. You can do this through a walk. You can, so using the body, doing the postures is a way into it. There are other ways.
And that's such an important message, I think, to everybody. It's not
inclusive.
It's inclusive. You're not trying to be anything. You're not in competition with anything. Not even competition for yourself. Just what you can do is great. And I think that's a really, really important message for us all to hear when life is so hectic and we always feel like we need to be on edge at all. And someone who works, myself in education, always feeling that there's a competition to be first, be the best, and it's not very healthy. So I think that's a really, really important message that you've given there in a really lovely way. We're going to start coming to the end now, unfortunately, and finish off with our final little feature, which is called We Are All Geographers. And we always ask each guest to come up with a word that the following guest can attempt to link to geography or the concept of geography or the field of geography. So last episode we had Hina Robinson, geography teacher, and she was challenged by the guest before her, Helen Young, who gave her the word paranormal. And she did a pretty decent job of linking the paranormal to geography. Now, Hina was, she just wanted to come up with the first thing that came into her head. And she said, so here we go, Joanna, here's the word. The first word that came into her head was discombobulated. So
I don't even know what that means.
I know. I had to double check. Discombobulated. So basically, definitely it means, you're feeling very, very confused and like, what's going on kind of thing. Like it's almost, you're so confused, you feel lost. Yeah. So now I can link that to geography very easily because I'll share that after you've had a go. So, Joanna, you've got 30 seconds. Can you link the word or the feeling of being discombobulated to geography? You have 30 seconds.
Like discombobulated, the feeling of feeling lost. So, if, for instance, you're out and about in the outdoors, going for a lovely walk in Dartmoor, and you're kind of in the middle of of this moorland, and you don't have a signal on your mobile phone, you kind of should have brought your compass, but you didn't. So you feel a bit discombobulated, but that's okay, because if the sun is actually out, maybe you could...
Time's up.
Maybe you could follow the sun.
Yeah. That was not the thing I was thinking of, but that works perfectly. Like, you kind of like go where and you get lost, and you're so lost that you've got no sense of direction. You're so confused. You're like, and I was just thinking that a lot of people find lots of different aspects of geography very, very confusing and very out of place and very out of depth, like, because it's so diverse and we've got so much depth and breadth. And I'll tell you this wonderful story. You'll like this because it's to do with your colleagues in NOAA, in the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States. I had the privilege of doing a placement out there in Boulder, Colorado, and I sat into one of their kind of like briefing meetings where they would like update each other on their research, right? And there was this talk, and I understood a little bit of it. I was grasping, but really I was discombobulated, right? And I turned to the scientist next to me, who's like PhD doctor, well-known scientist over there, and I said, "Tell me the truth. How much of this do you understand?" Thinking, all of it, of course we know. I'm like, to be honest, about 20-25% of it is that we don't actually understand a lot of what we're all doing because we're so deep in our own fields. We only need to understand the bits where our research connects with somebody else's research and how it overlaps. But everything else is like, no idea. We just leave it to them. And so they were feeling discombobulated despite feeling, because of the multidisciplinary nature of the... So, yeah. You had a tough one. That was a tough one, Johnny.
Yeah.
And
I do feel like that most of the time, actually.
there you go.
I think it's the nature. Yeah, it's the nature of the job. I mean, it's the challenge, but it's also the motivation. It makes it interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because if they all sat there just nodding their head, going, "Yep, we know this. Yep, we have know this." What are you progressing? What's the point?
What would science be?
Exactly, and that's what makes it fascinating. And I actually love the fact that I was way out of my comfort zone, but I could, when an equation came up, I'm like, oh, I recognise that from my degree, but I'm not quite sure how they're applying it, or something like that. And then and then the penny drops with something, and then other things kind of make sense. But then you're now into that gives you more questions than answers. I loved it. I revelled in that. Shame I was only there for a couple of months. You've now got to come up with a word for our following guest. So it could be anything you like. It could be something we've talked about. What would you like our next guest to have a go at linking to geography?
I'll say language.
Okay, I like that one.
The interesting thing about the English language.
What's that?
It only has one word for language. In Portuguese, for example, you have language as in, English, French, German, and language as in musical language. Back
in America again, when I was this time in San Francisco, speaking to, I can't remember the name, but I wrote a blog about it, about these indigenous people who came into the Exploratorium Museum and talked about how their language was a distinct and quintessential part of their culture, and how this and they talked about exactly what you just said. And one of the things that Giselle Martin, who's a wonderful person, and if you're listening, Giselle, I'd love for you to come onto the show. And she said, you don't actually have a word for tree. The word loosely translates into, I think it's like holder of the soil or protector of the land or something like that. But they also have so many different words to represent what the tree's function is, its stage in life, whereas we just go, oh, it's a seed, a sapling, and a tree,
Yeah.
So I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because when you delve into other languages, you can understand, the culture through the language, because the vocabulary tells you so much. If you have 10 different words for tree, maybe that means something, maybe that means that tree is really important in their culture. Whereas if you just have the one, then it's, I think that's, it's quite interesting when you, and this is what also attracted me to Sanskrit, was to have a little glimpse of the language, because it is a bit different from what we're used to, because you understand it through sounding it. So it's experiencing the sound of Sanskrit that you will understand its meaning.
And we all need to do that kind of stuff a lot more often, just experience things. Joanna, I could go another half an hour on just this topic alone, but I do have to call it a night now. So to finish off, do you have anybody you want to say hello, any shout outs you'd like to give folks at the Met Office? I don't know.
That's hard to think. I mean, maybe to all my friends around the world I haven't seen for a while because of obvious circumstances, but hopefully we'll be able to meet again very soon.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. And if anybody wants to maybe get in touch or follow your work, where would be the best place for that? I mean, I think you've got you have a profile on the Met Office website, I believe?
Yes. You'll have one. Yes, I've got a profile on the Met Office website. I've got a LinkedIn profile as well.
Awesome.
But I'm not big on social media, to be honest.
Nope. That's okay. Because what we like to do, we like to try to expand the geography community. So if anybody, is really, really interested in learning about the work that you do, with energy meteorology and the kind of how you approach that, then you have a public profile and they can have a look at that. And we'll put the link in the description of the podcast. I've really enjoyed this evening. I feel so chilled and relaxed. I'm going to go do my downward facing dog and my tree pose and everything like that, and perhaps do a few sun salutes before I go to bed now. I've somebody needed to kick me into redoing that kind of stuff again. And Joanna, I think you've done that job for me. So thank you so much for this chat, Joanna. I really loved it. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Kit. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.